And now that one is running. Okay, I'm going to start with kind of an introductory couple of paragraphs just to let you know what we're doing, and then we'll get started on questions. You have been selected to speak with us today because you have been identified as someone who has much to share about the subject of the 1979 strike at the Clinton Corn Processing Company. We would like to record our conversations today. We also need you to sign a form devised to meet Augustana College's research requirements and 2 other forms to give the recording as a gift to the Clinton Public Library. Essentially, this document states that 1, only the information that you are comfortable being used in the research will be used. 2, your participation is voluntary and you may stop at any time if you feel uncomfortable. And 3, you may choose to remain anonymous if you wish. Otherwise, your name may be used in future presentations, publications, documentaries, and online materials based on this research. Please sign the release forms after reading them if you agree to participate. After the recording has been transcribed and you have placed whatever restrictions you would like on what information will be released, then the materials will be placed in the archives of the Clinton Public Library permanently. Thank you for your agreeing to participate. We planned this interview to last no longer than 1 hour. During this period, we have several questions that we would like to cover. We do not foresee that any question will make you uncomfortable, but please let us know if it does and we can move on to another topic. Please also let us know at any point if you need to end the interview earlier, and we will shorten the interview. On the other hand, if time begins to run short, it may be necessary to interrupt you in order to push ahead and complete this line of questioning, or come back for a follow-up interview. You're also fine if you need to take a break at any moment. Just let us know.
Thank you.
Sam. Okay, well, with that taken care of, so for the record, can you please state your name, current city and state of residence, and your present occupation?
Okay. Ronald Andresen. My address is 1214 South 12th Street, Clinton, Iowa, and I am retired from EI DuPont's.
Okay, cool. And then, so what is your interest in discussing the Clinton Corn Company strike?
Oh, well, I lived through it. I grew up through it. I was on the city council during those years. There were several other minor strikes prior to the major one. So, in fact, when I was going to college, I think they had one, and when I was growing up, I think probably in the early 50s, I think there was a small strike at that time too.
Mm-hmm. And so what is it that you would like people to know or understand about the strike looking back all these years?
Well, I think it's important to preserve history. I chair the Historical Preservation Commission here in town too, so I know how important Clinton history is, and it would, I think, help a lot of people to understand what happened at that time, because there was it kind of split families and that sort of thing up.
Mm-hmm. All right, great. Okay, so let's talk about before the strike. So would you be able to describe like what the employment and economic outlook looked like in Clinton before everything occurred?
Yeah, well, on what span of years? Starting in '79, you mean?
Yeah, or like, yeah, I guess I'd be fine, or however you feel, you know.
Okay, well, like I say, I was in high school in 1950. My father worked there in fact, he retired after 47 years. I worked there. My brother worked there. I had 4 uncles that worked there, and probably 6 cousins. So, you know, I was quite aware of the economic impact that Clinton Foods, it was Clinton Corn Processing, I think at that time, had on the community. And I know that whenever some of these labor management strifes would pop up, the effect that it had just on our family finances. And I think at that time, Clinton Corn Processing was probably the largest employer in Clinton. Pretty sure they were. Mm-hmm. They had close to 2,000 workers. I think they had about 1,500 or 1,600 workers there at that time. So, and then as I was going to college, I graduated in 1954 from Clinton High School, and then went to the local community college, and so I was employed summers there too. And so I could see some of the strife on both sides. I had a good friend of the family that was a member of management. My sister worked for the she worked there too, for the HR person at that time, Bob Coons. And so it was kind of key in that. And then when I went to college and into the service, and when I come back, I worked there until 1960. And then because of some of the working conditions and the labor problems that they had, I went to work for DuPont's. And
yeah, and that was actually going to be my next question. Could you describe specifically what it was like working at Clinton Corn?
Oh, well, it was like family because you knew everybody. You know, I grew up in Chansey, which is that area of town, and so everybody that you knew, their family was either employed there or employed with the railroad or associated businesses that it affected. So, and it was a good place to work. They hired a lot of summer help, college students, and I think that helped them too, you know, in furthering their education. And well, some of them did go back to work there at Clinton Foods also.
And specifically, what was your role there while you were working there?
Oh, well, I was just a laborer when I was a student, and then later on, I worked in the research lab, and in fact, it's kind of strange. My future sister-in-law and I worked together, and she introduced me to my wife. So it was kind of interesting.
Yeah.
And friends that I had later on in life, I had worked with them too. In summers, I worked in the lactic plant, which they manufactured lactic acid. And while I was there, they had developed the research plant had developed isomonose, which is a sweetener. And so it was interesting. It was good. Working in the summers out in the plant, I could see that it wasn't a safe place to work. Working conditions weren't the best, but in those days it wasn't too important, and I think everybody was happy to have a job. And like, you know, my family had worked there from the 20s, so I had uncles that worked there as soon as they got out of school. I had a grandfather that worked there, and my brother worked there, my sister worked there. So it was, I think it contributed a lot to the finance of the community, and they were good, you know, the salaries were good paying for that time.
And so you eventually left. Can you tell me when it was again that you left?
Well, several reasons, but some of it was the problems that they had with union and management. They kind of pitted people against each other, and I was uncomfortable. I didn't like that feeling, and plus I had a good friend that had got killed down there shortly before I left, and I didn't work out when I was in the research lab. Didn't work out in the plant a whole lot, but I'd go out and get samples and that, and I could see the safety conditions, and that was one thing that drew me to DuPont's was their strong safety record.
And what year was that again when you left for DuPont?
1960.
1960. All right.
Yeah.
You had already said that. All right. Great. Thank you. Okay. So. So let's talk about then the community a little bit before the strike. And I think you'd already kind of covered it, but can you just explain, the community and the relationship everyone had with each other before the strike? Not just Clinton Corn, but Clinton in general.
Okay. Now you're talking about the 79 to 80 strike, the 6-month one?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Because there were several small ones prior to that. And I was on the city council at that time, so it really made it difficult because the union felt that the city was taking the side of management, which we weren't actually. I mean, they had difficulties with some of the strikers doing damage to cars and threatening people and that type of thing. And so it made it kind of bad. But prior to that, really, I think the relationships were pretty good in the community with everyone. But that period, that 6-month period, really drew a lot of families apart. I know my sister left and went out to Kenplex. She went with the HR person at that time and went out there, and that was, I think, one of the main reasons that he left too. And it was really a hurtful time and a divisive time in the community. And prior to that, people depended on their lives, their livelihood for work at Clinton Foods.
Yeah, definitely. So would you be able to describe then more the community, like more specifically the community during the strike then, and as they did start to break apart, kind of what happened, especially with you being on the city council? What was that like?
Oh, well, so I talked to my daughter the other day about it. I told her I was going to be doing this, and she told me something that I didn't realize, that her mother had told, they were teenagers at that time, and she didn't allow them to answer the phone calls because we got a lot of really abusive phone calls, and I wasn't aware of that. I mean, I would get them, and my wife would too, and you dealt with them. I mean, it was no big deal. And my mother and my father had opposite opinions of what was going on down there. My dad had worked there, like I had said, for 47 years. His family had worked there from like 1908, I think, on. So, and he had brothers, and some of my cousins stayed with them. They had an option of either, well, some of them striked, and some of them went back to work, and that was real divisive. Some of my cousins retired, and like I said, some went back, and then there was hard feelings because they had a job and the other ones didn't. And so they were on unemployment, and at that time it became kind of difficult to find jobs. I can't remember the economic times, but evidently there was something going on in that time period where labor wasn't as, jobs weren't as readily available. But, and just friends that I'd known all my life because of my position on the council, some of them wouldn't even talk to me. Even people in my church. So, but you just kind of learned to overlook that type of thing because I knew that people were having a hard time, getting along. Knew some of the, the union people real well, and so that made it hard too.
Mm-hmm.
So the calls and things were from strikers?
Yes.
Okay.
And if you're comfortable with it, would you mind discussing more of like what happened with between you and your family? Because you did explain that you had a lot of family members working there. So could you talk about the tension and the strife between you and your family?
It really didn't cause a lot because my sister had left. My cousins, one of them retired, the other one went back. He was an instrument person down there, and then he retired from there. My dad had already retired. And I think two of my uncles that were still living at that time had retired too, because it was really divisive. I mean, there were neighbors that wouldn't talk to each other. It's really hard to imagine that happening, in this day and age. But it was people came in from out of town, out of state, union people. In and demonstrated, and you sympathized with them, but like I was on the Police and Public Grounds Committee on the City Council, so I dealt with it directly, and our police chief at that time, Wayne Wilkie, was a very, his dad had worked there, and his grandfather I think had worked there too. So we grew up. We lived within about 1 or 2 blocks of where ADM is now, Clinton Foods. Mm-hmm. And so it was hard, and he had family members, and I did, and some of the policemen did too. But you had to uphold the law, And we didn't do anything that, you know, that wasn't required by law. You can't have people damaging property or threatening people. I mean, they would key cars, or they'd stick ice picks in their tires, that kind of thing, or try to stop them from. They hired a lot of outside people. I'm not sure where they were from, if they were from Clinton or where, but people that had been employees hired them to fill the vacancies. And I think they probably knew that at some point they weren't going to want the strikers. Some of them weren't going to be able to go back.
We also had some questions about some specific events that occurred during the strike time. So we were wondering if you could elaborate on anything that you know about specifically like the July protest strike.
Oh, well, just that I was aware of it.
Yeah.
I mean, the police chief called our committee and brought us in, and we talked about it. He told us what was going on in that. I think the strike ran from. Trying to think. I thought it was later. I thought it was September until June. I'm not sure. I think that were the dates. It was about 6.5 months, somewhere in that time range. It seemed a lot longer at the time,
Yeah.
but it was just that I think everybody thought that they were going to come, because in the past they had come to some kind of a conclusion and get things settled, but they just couldn't get together on things, and so the union walked out. They took a vote and walked out, and I knew then that they were in trouble, because shortly after they were locked out, basically. And it's, you know, people that wanted to return, the employees, they let them come back, and I think they had to sign some kind of a release or a statement or something, and the others were not going to be offered a job when the strike was over. So it was kind of sad, really. And
a couple more events, and if you know, as much as you can tell, if not, then that's totally fine.
Yeah.
Do you remember anything specifically about the Labor Day riot?
No, I don't.
Okay.
Really. I think it was up at Eagle Point Park, if I'm not mistaken. They had a big labor rally up there, and it got out of hand. But I wasn't there. I stayed away from all of that. One, because of my position. One, because I had young children, and I didn't want them to get involved or be drug into it. And, like I said earlier, we got a lot of really abusive phone calls, and so we tried to shield the kids as much as we could from that.
A couple more events, and I find that interesting that you did stay away and you were observing. Do you know anything about the Angela Davis visit?
No.
No. And then one more. What about the decertification vote of June 13, 1980? Anything about that?
Oh, I remember it taking place. I was quite shocked when it happened, and there was a lot of animosity on both sides. It was really there were a lot of innuendos, you know, that people were forced to vote to get, you know, in order to get keep their job and that. But I don't think it was ever proven one way or the other. It was quite controversial, and it was made the news because it had a great impact on, you know, a lot of people.
Could you specifically could you specifically describe more that impact that people felt because of that vote and that decertification?
Well, I think people that went back to the company and, you know, and kept their jobs, they were kind of looked on as traitors, kind of, by the people that didn't. Because you had strong union members, and then you had people that were just members, you know. It was a fact of life. When I worked, I was a union member, but I never really participated. My father did. He was into it, and a couple of my cousins were into the union. But I really did, had no interest in that at that